In this video, I want to introduce you to form enrichment and shortening in Reform. For B2B marketers, form enrichment and shortening can be a really effective way to improve your conversion rates, but also improve the quality of data you're capturing in your forms, data that ultimately ends up in your CRM. So let's see how it works. Here I've got a pretty standard single-page lead generation form, the sort that you might embed on your website or landing page. Like any form, the user has to enter all of their information, even if they're a known and potentially high-value lead, like the CEO of Microsoft. Now, as we know, when you increase the number of fields on your form, you're also increasing the friction for that visitor and reducing the conversion rate of leads. You also run the risk of someone mistyping data in your form fields and getting bad data into your CRM. This is where form enrichment can be really helpful. What form enrichment does is use a third-party data provider with verified and accurate contact data to make a real-time call and automatically fill in fields from that data provider based on the lead's email address. Let's see how to set that up in Reform. To enable form enrichment, you go back to the Reform dashboard and click on the Enrichment tab. If form enrichment is enabled in your account, by default the Reform data source will be selected. This is powered by ExactBuyer. If you already have an ExactBuyer plan and API key, you can choose that option and enter the API key in the settings. Once you're connected to a data source, the first thing that we'll want to know is which block to use to search for contacts through the data source API. Now, most forms only have a single email address, so if that's the case, this will automatically be selected for you. The second thing that you want to do to enable form enrichment is to map properties from the data source to blocks and inputs on your Reform form. So here I'm going to map the first name block on my Reform form to the first name property from the data source. Similarly, I'll map all of the other fields that I can as well. Now notice that I'm now mapping every field on my Reform form. I still have this "How can we help" block, which is a comments field. You might have something similar as well. For now, I'm going to leave this form shortening toggle disabled. This is a feature we'll come back to later. To save my settings and mapping, hit save, and let's go back and look at the form and see what that does. Now if I view my form and enter the email address of an unknown lead, nothing happens. It's making a real-time call to the data source, but it's not returning any data for that email address, so it's not able to fill in any of those fields. If, however, I enter the CEO of Microsoft, it makes a real-time API call and is able to find data, and it will automatically fill in any fields for which it has accurate data on that contact. Now, you may be wondering, why bother showing those fields at all if I have data from the data provider and it's accurate? This is where form shortening comes into play. To enable form shortening, you go back into the enrichment settings and enable the toggle under form shortening. This will automatically hide fields on the form for users unless they can't be enriched by the data provider. Let's see how that works. Now, when I go back to look at my form, you can see that by default, all of those fields that I used in my mapping are hidden. If I enter an unknown email address and it's not able to identify a contact on that email, it'll automatically display those fields and the lead is going to have to fill them out. If, however, I enter a known record, those fields will remain hidden because Reform was able to enrich those fields and the user does not have to fill them out, making for a much shorter form. The data is still there, being populated by the data source, but they're hidden from the user, making for a much simpler and shorter form experience. Now, if Reform only matches a subset of those fields that you've mapped, only the fields that were not able to be mapped will be shown on the form. So now the user is able to submit a much shorter form and all of the data has been captured, some of it enriched by the third-party data provider. Of course, like all of our features, this can also be used in multi-step lead capture forms. Thank you.